With nothing going on in the NBA, let's look at the great series we've had in the past. This is Part 2, 2021, the 76ers versus the Hawks in the second round. Let's get into it. First off, we set the stage. The Sixers were coming off an easy series against the Wizards, the 1-8 matchup. We all knew they'd be here. And the Hawks were one of the surprising teams of the year. Trae Young finally emerged as a superstar and led the Hawks to the playoffs, where they would defeat the Knicks in the first round, while Trae being the villain of New York, still living rent-free in their heads. But now we start in Game 1 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Hawks came out on fire with 42 points in the first quarter, and Trae Young leading the way with 12. And they would only extend this lead, making it over 20 by halftime. But it wouldn't be until the start of the fourth quarter where Philly started to fight back, with Seth Curry and Korkmaz hitting a few buckets, and Ben Simmons looking like he actually wanted to play basketball. Philly ramped up the defensive pressure and got out into transition, getting a lot of quick, easy buckets. But with a minute 40 left, the Hawks were still up 10. But Seth Curry would start the run with a double step-back three. Philly would apply a ton of pressure in the backcourt, and forcing the young Hawks to make mistakes, which left the door open. The Sixers had got it down to 3 with 40 seconds left, and then Bogdanović would do this.
Great trap in rotation. Herder under duress. Bogdanović for three. Oh, killer. And he says, shush to the crowd.
Bogdanović puts in the dagger, and the Hawks survive. Or so we thought. The Hawks tried to use the hack-a-bend strategy, but they couldn't stop turning the ball over, which just kept leaving that door open. But Atlanta would hit their free throws, and John Collins would put on the final exclamation point, his first dunk on Embiid in the series. Hawks put on the finishing touches, getting a Game 1 road win in Philly and taking home court advantage, with Trae Young leading the way with his 35 and 10 and big shots from Bogdanović and Herder down the stretch. Hawks steal Game 1, 128 to 124. Game 2 coming up, the 76ers need a win. They can't go down 2-0 going back to Atlanta. Another electric home Philly crowd ready to cheer on their team, and the Sixers were going to feed into it. The first play on the tip-off of the game explains this perfectly. Philly would turn defense into offense, completely shutting down the Hawks' offense. But the biggest adjustment they made was how they dealt with Trae Young. As you can see in Game 1, Danny Green was guarding Trae Young. And on these plays, Danny Green is too easily screened with Trae Young kills. If he goes over the screen, it's an easy lob or floater for Trae. And if he goes under, it's a deep three. And Danny Green not being big enough to fight through, or fast enough to run with Trae Young one-on-one. But in Game 2, Ben Simmons is guarding Trae Young. And as you can see on this play from Game 2, Ben Simmons' length and speed affects Trae Young. And even when he overcompensates one way, Tobias Harris is right there to contest the shot and force a bad miss. And when Ben Simmons is off of Trae, whether it be Danny Green or Seth Curry, it's much easier for him to score and create for the Hawks. And using this strategy, Philly would build up a big lead in the first quarter. But Atlanta would continue to fight, cutting it down to 4 in the second quarter. And it would stay this way until halftime, where the 76ers led by 2, with Tobias Harris leading the way with his 18 first half points. These teams would continue to battle throughout all the third quarter, and Shake Milton caps it off with a deep 3. And in the fourth quarter, it would be him doing most of the damage, as the 76ers pulled away and got the Game 2 win versus Atlanta, led by Joel Embiid and his 40 points. As we head back to Atlanta for Game 3, with the series tied 1-1 and already some superstars with some all-time performances. This electric Hawks crowd was ready for some playoff basketball, which they hadn't had since the Jeff Teague and Al Horford era. And the Hawks would not disappoint in the first half as this game went back and forth. With Trae Young putting in a last-second layup, the Hawks were down 5 at halftime. But in the third quarter, Philly would pull away, using their defense to force turnovers and create easy transition opportunities, just like the rest of the series. They would build up a 20-point lead and would never look back from there, as they win 127 to 111 and take Game 3, bouncing back with 2 straight wins after that Game 1 loss. As we move on to Game 4 and a must-win for Atlanta, as not many can see them coming back from 3-1 against this Philly team. Although it's a Doc Rivers team and the odds are definitely in their favor. Philly would come out this game with a steady lead, building it up to 17 with about 3 minutes left in the second quarter. But in the third quarter, Atlanta would fight back, with John Collins putting in a few highlight dunks. And early in the fourth quarter, Bogdanović puts in a 3, giving the Hawks their first lead since the first 2 minutes of the game. and these teams would battle, trading buckets, and with 3 minutes left, Korkmaz puts in a huge 3 to put the Sixers up 4. It was up to the Hawks to respond, and John Collins would do just that. They'd get the ball back, and Trae Young would put in a floater, putting the Hawks up 1. Next possession, they'd turn the Sixers over, and Trae Young would get fouled and hit both free throws. Embiid would then put in a pair, and they would turn the Hawks over on the next possession. Sixers down 1, 20 seconds left, and this is how it played out.
Shot clock is off. Got a chance to take the last one if they want it. Sixers down a point. Here is Embiid. No, to follow Simmons. No, and it's out of bounds, and it's Atlanta ball. Simmons touched it last.
76ers turn it over, but they foul Trae Young, and he hits both, leaving the door open for the tie. And this is what the Sixers would do.
Chance at the last shot to tie it here if you're Philadelphia. Trying to force overtime. Here is Curry, puts it up, and no good! And Atlanta wins it!
Seth Curry just nearly misses an impossible 3, and the Hawks hold on to avoid the 3-1 deficit, tying the series at 2 games apiece heading back to Philly, with all 5 Hawks starters in double figures. Which leads us to Game 5. With the series tied 2-2, we know how important this game is, with 82% of Game 5 winners when the series is tied 2-2 come out on top. And we already know these Philly fans were going to be rowdy. And the Sixers would play off this crowd, building up their lead off the back of Joel Embiid, who had 24 and 10 in the first half. And the Sixers would build up a huge lead, leading 62-36. Looks like yet another blowout win for Philly in this series. And it wouldn't get better in the third quarter, with Seth Curry going off, 14 points and 4 for 5 from 3, killing the Hawks in this quarter. And the Sixers would extend their lead to 22 at the end of the third. But in the fourth quarter, the Hawks would make their comeback, led by the playmaking and scoring of Lou Williams, as he poured in 13 points in this fourth quarter. John Collins banks in this 3, and all of a sudden, it's an 8-point game. And then the Trae Young heroics would begin, getting into the paint, floater after floater, getting layups, mid-ranges, and all the way until the Hawks were up 105-104. And then, Danilo Gallinari hits a huge mid-range to put the Hawks up 3. Atlanta would hit their free throws, completing the comeback. Another shocking win in Philly for the Hawks, as they take a commanding 3-2 series lead. And now the Sixers are facing elimination, to a team they thought they'd have an easy sweep or 5-game series on. And now to Game 6 in Atlanta. Hawks with a chance to knock out the Sixers, and they started off hot, and it would be led by Trae Young, making plays for his offense and hitting deep threes. But the Sixers would continue to fight, with Curry, Harris, and Embiid doing most of the damage. And these teams would go back and forth throughout the third quarter. And with 5 minutes left in the third, John Collins would put a spark for the Atlanta Hawks.
For his first basket of the quarter. Lobs. Oh, Collins with one hand on top of Embiid. Oh, my. And Embiid is shaken up as well after Collins hammered it home on the big guy.
John Collins puts Embiid in a chokehold and throws it down on him. And late into the fourth quarter, these teams were still fighting. And with the Hawks down 4, Trae Young would do this.
Back getting bumped by Maxey. Young, let's go of it. Oh, he got it! Ice Trae gets the Hawks within a point.
Trae Young hits a wild 3 to bring the Hawks within 1. But Embiid would answer on the other end, and Philly would hit their free throws, officially beating the Atlanta Hawks, leading us to a Game 7 back in Philly. And this game would be a dogfight, with these teams going back and forth up until halftime. And that would continue throughout the third quarter. Neither team could pull away from each other. And throughout the fourth quarter, Kevin Huerter was scoring, but Embiid would keep responding on the other end. With 3 minutes left, Ben Simmons has a great chance to tie, and the 6'10" all-star that has drawn comparisons to LeBron James passes up the wide-open dunk to tie, and Matisse misses the layup, costing the Sixers points. And then, with 2.5 minutes left, Trae Young would do this.
2.5 to go. Long 3 on its way. And Trae Young, ice cold, delivers a 3.
Trae Young puts a dart into the city of Philadelphia, continuing his East Coast villain run. Philly would keep it close, but with Atlanta up 1, Kevin Huerter gets fouled and he hits all 3 free throws. And Embiid and the Sixers just couldn't score. Atlanta hits their free throws and moves on to play the Bucks in the conference finals, What a 7-game series. Barely any blowouts and all close good games throughout. Hard to believe that the free throw boys gave us a good series. And a Doc Rivers team disappointing? That never happens. But what puts this series above the Bucks and Nets is every game was close, or at least entertaining. That series, especially early, just felt like the Bucks couldn't compete unless the Nets were playing really bad. So that's the best series from 2021, and I'll see you in the next video. See you later.